In 2004, a shock that was both a miracle and a nightmare exploded in the middle of 19 years of despair. A DNA signal from a distant lab suddenly matched the profile of an 8-year-old girl who had been snatched from her peaceful life in Illinois in 1985. Harper Adams, a name that had sunk deep into dusty cold case files. Just weeks earlier, the Adams family was still trying to learn how to live with a loss that had no grave, until those DNA results hit them like a knife to the chest. If the data was real, then for 19 long years, they had been grieving in the dark, while someone else had been living under the stolen identity of their own daughter. Today, I'm taking you straight into the eye of a tragedy that lasted nearly 2 decades. What really happened on that deadly afternoon who took Harper's entire childhood from her, and how an 8-year-old child could vanish so cleanly that she might as well never have existed on the map of America. This isn't just a missing person case, this is one of the most brutal, haunting, and hope-exploding survival stories the true crime genre has ever recorded. You are my most precious gem. Take a deep breath, because right now we're stepping into a journey that made the whole world cry and hold its breath. Before we dive deep into this shocking true story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you're passionate about journeys to find forgotten justice, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next part. Illinois in 1985 was still considered a relatively peaceful place, where small towns around Will County moved slowly, bound together by families who had known each other for generations. People believed in community safety, kids walked to school with hardly anyone worrying too much, house doors were often left unlocked, and any stranger who stood out quickly became neighborhood gossip. In that setting, the Adams family lived in Manuka, a small community surrounded by cornfields that stretched to the horizon. The family had 3 members: Ellen Adams, a single mother, who worked as a librarian at the local junior high; 8-year-old Harper Adams, a 3rd grader at Manuka Elementary, and a cousin who stayed with them for a short time to help watch the kids when Ellen had to work overtime. Though they weren't well off, the Adams family stayed stable: a small pale yellow house, an old station wagon, and simple dinners filled with laughter. Harper was a smart, sensitive little girl who always carried a small notebook to draw the birds in their backyard. Every morning she walked to school with her 2 best friends, Jamie Reynolds and Abby Moore. That route was so familiar that Ellen sometimes stood at the window watching, never imagining that familiar safety could disappear in a single day. About 2 weeks before the incident, a small but unusual detail caught a few parents' eyes. A dark green Ford Bronco started showing up around the school grounds at dismissal time. No one paid much attention, just assumed it belonged to a new parent, but the strange thing was that the truck always parked far from the curb and the driver almost never left the cab. A few students said they saw a man inside wearing sunglasses, with a patchy beard, just staring at the groups of kids leaving school. Those stories were ignored, lost to the common small-town belief that crime doesn't happen here. The morning of April 3, 1985 unfolded like any other ordinary day. Harper carried her little red backpack with her favorite colored pencils inside, closed the door, waved to her mom, and ran to catch up with her friend. That afternoon, when school let out, Jamie said they all left the gate together, but Harper stopped to tie her shoe and said she'd follow in a minute. Jamie and Abby walked a few steps ahead, and saw Harper standing near a utility pole by the parking lot, where the green Bronco was parked. A man got out, said something Jamie couldn't hear. Harper took 1 step back, but then Jamie saw her nod slightly, probably because the man was pointing at some papers on the ground or asking for help with something. It all happened in a few short seconds. When Jamie and Abby looked back again, Harper was gone. No scream, no sign of a struggle, just a sudden illogical disappearance. The 2 kids thought Harper had taken the back way home like she sometimes did, so they didn't think anything more of it. Only when Ellen realized Harper wasn't home by 3:20 as usual, did worry start to creep in. Ellen walked to the end of the driveway, looked around, then walked to the school and asked the few remaining teachers. No one had seen Harper after dismissal. After about an hour, Ellen started running along the side streets Harper usually took, calling her name and asking every neighbor who was sweeping their yard or watering plants. No one knew anything. By late afternoon she knocked on Jamie's door hoping for any clue, and Jamie's hesitant story about the man standing next to the green truck made Ellen's legs go weak. In a panic she called relatives, neighbors, anyone who could help search. Less than 20 minutes later, more than a dozen people spread out across the streets, searching the school grounds, empty lots, railroad tracks. They shouted Harper's name until their voices gave out, but it was all hopeless. No one knew that every passing minute was pulling Harper farther and farther from the place she called home. At 5:32 p.m., Ellen's trembling hand picked up the phone and dialed 9. Her voice broke as she explained that her 8-year-old daughter had vanished on the way home from school. The Will County Sheriff's Office received Ellen Adams's call at 5:32 p.m., and just minutes later, the first 2 patrol cars roared down Ridge Road with lights flashing, shattering the usual quiet of Minooka. The duty deputy quickly assessed the situation using standard missing child protocols: the victim's age, the circumstances of the disappearance, the time near the end of the day, plus the witness seeing a strange man near Harper. All of it pushed the case far beyond a simple lost child scenario. Within 10 minutes of the report being logged, the incident was classified as a high-risk abduction, and an emergency response team was deployed to the scene, where Ellen stood shaking, her eyes red with panic. When police arrived, the once quiet street turned chaotic as dozens of neighbors gathered in front of the Adams house, talking, guessing, searching in every direction, seriously contaminating the primary scene before authorities could secure it. Officers immediately separated Ellen from the crowd to take her initial statement. When Harper left school, her daily routine, the usual walking route, and the crucial detail she had just heard from Jamie, the man standing next to the green truck. After confirming Harper had never run away before, had no medical issues or family conflicts, police ruled out the possibility of her leaving on her own as virtually zero. They moved on to taking statements from Jamie Reynolds and Abby Moore, right in Jamie's yard, while the 2 terrified kids were drowning in fear and guilt for not realizing something was wrong sooner. Jamie said Harper was standing near a utility pole by the parking lot, and the man said something that got her attention. Though Jamie couldn't hear it, he clearly remembered the truck, a dark green Ford Bronco, older model, with a white decal on the rear window. Police wrote down every word because it was the clearest description they had of the moment Harper vanished. Meanwhile, several neighbors who lived near the school also reported seeing that same Bronco in the days before, usually parked at dismissal time, but no one thought much of it because they assumed it belonged to a parent. The matching statements from multiple sources made police immediately treat the vehicle as the central focus of the investigation. As more and more residents gathered, an officer had to set up and expand a temporary perimeter on the sidewalk, ordering everyone to leave the area to avoid destroying evidence. Investigators stretched crime scene tape from the elementary school gate all the way to the corner where Harper usually turned toward home, establishing a scene almost 2 blocks long. However, the neighbors' earlier independent searches had already trampled parts of it: footprints overlapping, dirt disturbed, small dropped items, impossible to attribute. In the chaos, police still worked to reconstruct the most accurate timeline possible. Harper left school at separated from her friends at 3:10, and was last seen between 3:12–3:14 near the parking lot. The incredibly short window made the likelihood of being put into a vehicle in just seconds extremely high. From the initial statements, police sketched a preliminary suspect description: white male, 30 to 45 years old, patchy beard, dark brown hair, wearing large sunglasses. Combined with the vehicle description, the information was immediately broadcast over the radio to every patrol car in Will County and neighboring areas. At the same time, a BOLO, be on the lookout, alert went out for a green Bronco matching the description on all roads leading out of Minooka, especially routes connecting to interstate. In under 20 minutes, the entire area around the school had been searched once by officers and a few residents who kept helping despite being told to stay back. 4 officers walked every yard, every bush, every alley along Machiavelli Road, hoping Harper had simply chased an animal or hidden somewhere out of fear. Another team checked the dirt roads behind the school, places kids sometimes cut through to play, but found nothing. As the sky turned purple in late afternoon, police began expanding the search radius. Patrol units were split by direction. One headed northeast toward sparsely populated areas, with old barns, another went southwest toward the outskirts, and trails leading straight to the highway. The K-9 unit was urgently called from Joliet, with initial instructions to start scent tracking from the elementary school gate. Police also checked footage from a gas station a few blocks away, but 1985 camera systems were primitive, grainy images that couldn't make out plates or the person inside the truck. Meanwhile, Ellen Adams stood just behind the tape barrier, watching every departing police car in despair. She kept asking the officer in charge whether they'd found anything yet, but the only answers were silence and shaken heads. The once peaceful Manuka neighborhood had turned into a maze of flashing lights, radio chatter, distant barking from tracking dogs, and tense neighbor conversation. But amid all that chaos, the clearest thing in the first moments of the investigation was that Harper hadn't simply wandered off. Every sign pointed to something far worse, and time was moving far too fast to bring her back. The K9 team from Joliet arrived at the scene as darkness fell, and within minutes of removing the muzzle, the first tracking dog lowered its nose to the grass in front of the school gate and began following the scent from Harper's jacket left hanging in the classroom. Officers kept their distance so as not to disturb the trail. The dog led straight to a narrow dirt path that ran parallel to the parking lot, a shortcut only kids who lived behind the school used. The scent trail continued about 300 meters, then abruptly stopped in the middle of an open stretch where the ground was disturbed, as if something heavy had been set down or someone had knelt, and right there the dog lost the scent completely. That strongly indicated Harper had been put into a vehicle at that exact spot. Police immediately marked the area, stretched more tape and began examining every centimeter of the ground. Minutes later, an officer called the others over when he found a small piece of red fabric crushed into the dirt, exactly the color of the jacket Harper usually wore. Next to it were two parallel drag marks in the soil, not deep but clear enough to suggest something light like a backpack or child's shoes had been pulled. Investigators got down low with flashlights and documented everything for the scene log, but the most important find was the tire impression right beside the drag marks. A clear partial tread pattern from a mid-size vehicle, with the rear tire worn unevenly. The tread was cast in plaster on the spot and sent to the Will County Technical Unit. It wasn't enough to identify a plate, but the uneven wear was a key detail to narrow down matching vehicles. Meanwhile, search teams continued expanding into surrounding areas. Shallow ditches along the road were probed with flashlights and metal detectors in case personal items had been dropped during a struggle. At the edge of one ditch, an officer found a small footprint the size of an 8-year-old's, but it had been stepped on multiple times and was hard to date. The empty field behind the school, once an old sports field, was thoroughly checked because it was a perfect spot for a stranger to park unnoticed. A few old beer cans, cigarette packs and empty plastic bags were scattered around, but had no direct connection to Harper. Still, everything was collected for later elimination. Half a mile farther was an abandoned farm's old storage barns. Though the doors were locked, there were holes in the roof big enough for someone to crawl through. Two officers split up and checked every stall and wooden platform, but there were no signs of Harper or children's items, just inches of dust showing no one had been there in years. After sweeping the area behind the school, the search teams returned to the dirt path where the dog lost the scent and fanned out in the directions the suspect vehicle might have gone. From the tire marks, investigators concluded the truck had turned around at the start of the dirt road and headed toward Machiavelli Road, from where it could turn left into downtown Manuka or right onto I-80 in just minutes. Because Harper disappeared at rush hour, heavy traffic made tracking difficult, but also let the suspect blend in easily. Police marked 3 likely parking spots, next to the utility pole where Harper was last seen, the middle of the dirt path where the dog lost the scent, and the turnaround point where the tires dug deeper than normal. Those 3 points were connected on a map and compared to escape routes out of town. Investigators concluded the second spot, the dirt path through the small wooded area, was most likely where Harper was forced into the vehicle, because the tire marks showed sudden acceleration as if the driver was rushing to leave. Plus, that location was out of sight from homes and teachers, perfect for a quick, quiet abduction. By around 9 p.m., the command team set up the first search wrap right on the mobile command vehicle, parked beside the school. The map covered the entire residential northeast side of Manuka, the dirt road network, empty fields, parking areas, ditches, and all collected evidence locations. Officers used colored pins to mark key points, red for Harper's last seen location, yellow for the suspected approach area, green for areas already searched by teams, and black for places to recheck at dawn. The map was updated constantly as the search radius grew to half a mile, then a full mile, but every road led to the same hard-to-accept conclusion. Harper had been taken out of the area before anyone even realized she was gone. Tension hung over the entire investigation. The few small pieces of evidence only proved Harper had left her last location by vehicle rather than on foot, but nothing showed which direction she went next. Still, establishing the loss of scent spot, tire tracks, drag marks, and the map of roads near the school were the critical first steps in the search. The initial puzzle pieces to understand what happened in those fleeting minutes that made a child disappear without a single cry for help. Immediately after completing the first search map with its many unmarked gaps, the Will County Police moved to the next step. Canvassing every residence along the route, Harper walked daily and the adjacent areas where the green Bronco might have appeared before the incident. This began that same night and continued into the following morning, with the goal of gathering as many witness statements as possible before memories faded. The investigation team split into 3 groups and went door to door within roughly a 1-mile radius of the school. Many residents said they had seen nothing unusual beyond the normal after-school scene, but scattered details gradually formed important pieces of the puzzle. A woman who lived near the parking lot vaguely remembered a man wearing sunglasses, sitting in a vehicle like he was waiting for someone, and she was certain she had seen the Bronco parked in the same spot at least 2 days earlier. Another man who lived near the transformer station said he had seen the vehicle driving unusually slowly in the afternoon, as if observing the area rather than just passing through. Although the initial statements did not perfectly match in timing or detail, police carefully recorded every description and then cross-referenced them with the timeline of Harper's disappearance collected from the K-9 unit and the search map. As the teams moved into analysis, a clearer picture began to emerge. The green Bronco had appeared around the school at least 3 times in the week before the incident, usually at dismissal time, and often in a position with a clear view of the east exit, the route Harper most frequently took. Moreover, descriptions of the man in the vehicle from multiple witnesses were fairly consistent with Jamie's initial statement. A white male, middle-aged, dark hair, sparse beard, sometimes wearing large sunglasses even when it wasn't sunny. Although clothing details varied, many witnesses agreed that he was tall, somewhat thin, and his behavior showed particular attention toward children leaving the school grounds. Police paid special attention to the statement of a couple who lived right by the dirt road behind the school. They reported seeing the vehicle parked alone late in the afternoon 2 days earlier. The man inside showed no hurry. He simply sat looking out the window for a few minutes before driving away. When pressed for more detail, the wife recalled dried mud streaks on the rear of the vehicle, consistent with having driven on trails or open dirt, matching the tire impression collected during the search that evening. The investigators immediately flagged the entire statement and began filtering for the statements that most closely matched the time Harper vanished, specifically between 3:10 and 3:20 p.m. on April 3. Of the 27 statements collected in the first 24 hours, only about 6 fit both time and location. These were pinned separately on the crime scene map and became the foundation for reconstructing the Bronco's movements during the critical minutes. As the scattered clues came together, police began building the most basic suspect profile: a middle-aged man who habitually appeared around the school on multiple consecutive days, repeatedly observing children at dismissal, driving an older dark green Ford Bronco with a rear window decal, rear tires worn unevenly, matching the track found on the dirt road, and tending to avoid contact with adults while watching children from a moderate distance. This behavior was identified as classic pre-approach conduct by a deliberate predator, prompting police to elevate the case to maximum priority. Using the vehicle description, the team conducted the first filter through the list of registered green Bronco owners in Will County and the 2 adjacent counties. Though the 1985 data system was far from modern, filtering by color, even if not perfectly accurate, still reduced the list from hundreds of owners to around 30. When that list was combined with the suspect description and the direction of travel near the school, police produced a first-round suspect pool of roughly 9 to 12 men living within a 20-mile radius, who owned a green or similar Bronco and partially matched the physical description provided by witnesses. The list was not yet strong enough for arrests or deep interrogation, but it was enough to turn a vague missing person case into a focused investigation. Investigators used the list to begin comparing against the crime scene map, determining who among them had been near the school the previous week or could have traveled the recorded route. The atmosphere at the Will County Sheriff's Office grew heavy yet clearer. They were no longer chasing an undefined shadow but had a specific group of suspects to pursue. But at this point everything remained only a sketch, and any misjudgment of witness reliability could send the entire case into a dead end. The one certainty was that the green Bronco had not appeared by chance, and the man inside was not simply a passerby. The small town, accustomed to peace, now felt more tense than ever once police confirmed that the stranger's behavior had been premeditated, repeated, and sustained long enough that it could not be coincidence. That made the first-round suspect list the central focus of the investigation from this moment forward. The witness statements about the dark green Bronco matching at multiple points caused the investigation team to shift focus to tracing the vehicle, because among the still jumbled pieces of the disappearance, the car was the most concrete, recurring and verifiable detail. Officers collected every available camera in the area around the school, from the small gas station on Machiavelli Road, the grocery store at the Ridge Road intersection, to the old security camera in front of the repair shop near the eye. Each tape was played in slow motion and paused frame by frame despite the blurry, grainy quality. At the first gas station, the silhouette of an older model Bronco briefly appeared in frame near the end of dismissal time. The color was unclear, but the boxy body, wheelbase length, and rear window proportion all matched witness descriptions. The vehicle was traveling in the direction leading to Ridge Road, the exact route the K9 unit assessed as the suspect's escape path. The second tape from the grocery store revealed another key movement, a dark-colored Bronco traveling the same direction, similar shape, not long after Harper went missing. When footage from the two cameras was stitched together, the team saw that the vehicle's path formed a logical sequence, appearing near the school, crossing Machiavelli Road, merging into heavy traffic toward the highway. Both distance and direction matched the disturbed soil and tire impression found on the dirt road behind the school. Expanding the trace became urgent. The list of registered green Bronco owners in Will County was pulled from the vehicle registry and extended to Grundy County, Kendall County, and surrounding areas. The original list was not large, but to account for possible repainting or registration changes, the team also added Broncos described as dark green, navy, dark colored, or with unclear records. In total, more than 50 Broncos were listed. The list was narrowed to about 20 after eliminating vehicles in repair, long-term breakdowns, or inactive for months. In the next step, officers checked which plates had been near the school road in prior days, by cross-referencing traffic reports, old tickets, and locations noted by patrol unit. One traffic officer report of a Bronco stopped at the I-80 on-ramp at the exact time of the disappearance drew special attention. Though no plate was recorded, the physical description was almost a perfect match. Older body, white rear window decal, dark color, unevenly worn rear tires. The more they compared, the more suspicion focused on the same type of vehicle. The investigation team sent the full list to the Illinois State Police for coordination. Patrol stations along I-80 from Joliet to Morris were all given the specific description and instructed to report any green Bronco passing through. At the same time, state police in neighboring Indiana and Iowa received the information in case the suspect had left Illinois in the first few hours. While the vehicle data was being filtered, one team returned to the residential area near the school to re-interview homes missed the previous night. A man living near Old Ridge Road said he had seen a dark green Bronco parked in an odd spot on the Monday before Harper disappeared. He noticed because the driver rolled down the passenger window despite the cold weather. An elderly woman near the abandoned construction site confirmed seeing the same vehicle at least twice that week. The repeated pattern in the same area reinforced the conclusion that the suspect had been surveilling the school for days. When all the evidence was compiled, the original first-round suspect list shrank from more than 10 people to 7 vehicle owners who met nearly all criteria. Green Bronco, living within a reasonable travel radius, capable of being in Minooka at the right time. From this list, the analysis team began checking each person's background, employment status, travel habits, criminal history, or unusual behavior. One name stood out: Richard Hartman, residing in Grundy County. Hartman owned an older green Bronco with infrequent maintenance records, and had previously been noted driving unusually slowly around a different school area years earlier. That record was not enough to make him the prime suspect, but it made him stand out from the rest. The team began checking the status of Hartman's vehicle. The Bronco was reported operational, not stolen, not sold, yet had no traffic citations in the past 3 months, both suspicious and hard to verify. Still, everything about Hartman remained only relevant, not yet evidence of guilt or even enough to designate him the specific suspect. The fact that his name surfaced just as the list narrowed simply caused the investigation team to flag him in the report. By the end of the second night, police had a clear route the Bronco had traveled, a significantly shortened list of suspect vehicles, and several owners who required deeper scrutiny. However, the green Bronco had still not been located within the town, and that caused the team to start worrying that the suspect may have left Minooka very early, too early for the tracking pace at that time. The narrowed green Bronco list provided the basis for the investigation team to move to the next phase, screening every middle-aged male owner within Will County and neighboring counties. The team compiled all vehicle registration information, driving records, tax data, maintenance history, and prior traffic violations for each person to create initial profiles of the first-round suspect pool. Among the remaining 7 owners, some had completely clean records and steady jobs, but a few stood out due to unstable residence history or past reports of odd public behavior. Investigators began detailed background checks, pulling records of minor incidents such as harassment, disorderly conduct, drug possession, or anything involving minors. Some had been noted driving slowly around other schools or lingering too long, though without proof of crime. Such signs were added to their files to assess possible connection to Harper's disappearance. The team simultaneously checked recent travel history of the owners by reviewing gas receipts, work logs, family statements, and any indication they could have been near Minooka on April. Not everyone cooperated, and not everyone had clear records of their whereabouts that day. A few even became irritated upon learning they were being looked at simply for owning a similar vehicle. Still, every small clue was thoroughly exploited by the team. In the first round of interviews, officers visited homes and workplaces to ask about timeline, location, and activities on the day Harper vanished. Many interviews were brief. Some had solid alibis, such as clocking in at a factory with automated time records. Others were at the hospital with a sick mother. Some were traveling too far to be in Minooka during the relevant window. Those cases were eliminated immediately. However, 3 individuals on the list could not provide firm proof of their whereabouts that afternoon. One claimed to be doing freelance work at home with no one to confirm. Another said he was repairing his car in the garage alone. The third was Hartman, who could not account for any specific activity between 2 and Hartman's vague statement, combined with his history of frequent moves, made him stand out further, but the team still had to remain objective. A person could not be considered a suspect simply for lacking an alibi. When cross-referencing each person's timeline, police compared departure times from home, usual routes, and any activity that might overlap with the Bronco sightings on camera. The result eliminated most of the remaining owners. The afternoon shift worker in Joliet could not have been on Machiavelli at 3:20 p.m. The family traveler had hotel receipts. The long-distance driver withdrew cash from an ATM more than 40 miles away at the exact time. 3 individuals remained for closer scrutiny, with Hartman still in the cannot exclude group. His record showed he had lived near 3 different elementary schools within 4 years, often moving without clear reason. An old local police report described Hartman being warned for driving near a playground area at dismissal time, but not fined because no child was threatened. These details were not enough to charge, but sufficient to raise suspicion. One investigator noted that Hartman's behavioral pattern was unusual: no steady job, no long-term social ties, rarely participated in community activities, and kept odd hours. Some former neighbors said they rarely saw him interact friendly but often saw him sitting in his vehicle for long periods in a way that felt strange. During the screening, the team also contacted motor vehicle agencies and registration offices in 2 neighboring states to check whether other Broncos, possibly sold off-record or with fake plates, had appeared in the area. Results showed no irregularities, helping narrow the list considerably. By the end of the screening, the investigation team had a first-round suspect list reduced to just 3 individuals, including 2 owners with vague statements and Hartman. These 3 lacked enough evidence for charges, but also could not be removed from the investigation. The existing evidence only showed they owned matching vehicles, could have been present near the time of the crime, and had no clear alibi. This list became the basis for the team to dig deeper into each person's movement patterns, work history and daily habit. For the entire town of Manuka, narrowing the first-round suspect list brought both hope and heightened tension. Those 3 names were 3 doors still open in a case where every other path was gradually closing. The initial suspect list narrowed to 3 people, forcing the investigation team to solidify all data not just with witness statements, but with a clear reconstruction of the crime pathway, from the moment Harper left school to the point where the trail went cold. Investigators began by reorganizing all information chronologically. Harper got out of school separated from her friends while tying her shoe in a corner of the schoolyard around 3:10, was last seen by Jamie heading toward the parking lot at 3:12, and according to a witness near the dirt road, the green Bronco sped away from the area between. The K9 unit lost the scent in the middle of the dirt road behind the school, at a spot showing disturbed soil and tire tracks that matched an older Bronco. When all the timelines were pieced together, police concluded that the window in which the suspect got Harper into the vehicle lasted only about 2 minutes, at most a matter of seconds. From the point where the scent was lost on the dirt road, the movement pattern analysis team mapped 3 possible routes the suspect could have taken: back out to Machiavelli Road, then turn into the eastern residential area, continue straight down the dirt road to loop onto Old Ridge Road, or turn around and merge onto the direct route to Ridge Road, from there, able to turn right onto. When compared with the blurry gas station and convenience store camera footage, the final route became the near certain choice. The Bronco appeared on 2 cameras less than 5 minutes apart, heading toward the intersection. This made the school Machiavelli Ridge Road, I-80 route, the undisputed primary escape path. The investigation team continued expanding the pattern analysis by calculating travel times. If the suspect left the school around 3:14, he could pass the gas station reach the Ridge Road intersection by 3:22, and merge onto I-80 by 3:30, exactly matching a traffic officer's report of seeing a green Bronco stopped at the on-ramp. Once on I-80, an average speed of 60-70 miles per hour allowed him to leave Will County in 20-25 minutes, and cross out of Illinois entirely within an hour and a half if heading toward Indiana. This meant police had already lost the critical 15 to 20-minute golden window after the abduction. In addition to mapping the escape route, investigators checked whether the suspect might have stopped at rest areas or motels along the way. A list of locations: Glenwood Motel, rest stop mile 1118, and 2 large gas stations just past the interstate entrance, was re-examined. Employees at these places were asked if they had seen a green Bronco or a middle-aged man with a little girl after 3:30 p.m. that day. Most answers were vague or negative, and since it wasn't late at night, many people hadn't paid attention to passing vehicles. However, one employee at a rest stop near Morris was certain he saw a green Bronco pull in very briefly that afternoon, for maybe a minute, as if the driver stopped to check a map or rearrange something in the vehicle. He couldn't recall the exact time, but the statement was logged for analysis. When that detail was added to the timeline, investigators concluded the suspect may have made a very short stop to check on the victim, secure the back door, or review the route before immediately continuing. Though not definitive, the data fit the behavior of someone trying to leave the area as quickly as possible without drawing attention. The analysis continued with assessing the likelihood the suspect left the state. With average highway speeds and no traffic in that time window, police determined the suspect could have crossed into Indiana before Ellen even called. This calculation led the team to conclude the suspect had planned the crime in advance, including choosing an escape route that aligned perfectly with school dismissal time and the fastest way out of a populated area. The behavioral analysis unit then focused on the most telling detail: the green Bronco had been seen around the school for days, something that would not happen in an impulsive crime. The repeated timing, the same location, and the likelihood the suspect knew children's routines pointed to deliberate stalking. The 3 remaining round 1 suspects were scored against the behavioral model based on route compatibility, home distance, free time, daily habits, and residence history. Results showed only 2 could realistically have been near the school multiple days: one with an irregular work schedule, who often drove through the area to a nearby job site, The other was Hartman, who had scattered residence records and no fixed schedule during the week Harper vanished. The final investigative analysis report concluded the suspect had very likely stalked Harper or groups of children for days, owned a vehicle matching the tire tracks, chose the emptiest moment during dismissal, and fled via the fastest route to the intersection. Though gaps remained, the reconstructed crime pathway clearly defined the modus operandi: fast approach, fast movement, and rapid exit from town at a speed that left any police response one step behind. Even a highly accurate reconstructed crime pathway yielded no decisive breakthrough in the days that followed, and as police expanded searches along I-80 and into neighboring counties, a sense of running on empty began to spread through the team. Every neighborhood, every street, every stretch of dirt road within a 15-mile radius of the scene was searched repeatedly, yet everything remained empty. No new witnesses recalled additional details about the Bronco or the man seen near the school, and the original statements, though crucial, led nowhere concrete. 3 weeks passed, then 4. Every piece of physical evidence collected on day 1, tire tracks, drag marks, the small fabric scrap, had been analyzed, compared, and tested, but no fingerprints, foreign fibers or usable DNA emerged to trace a suspect. The tire tracks matched many older Bronco models and could not pinpoint a specific vehicle. Attempts to find similar samples elsewhere in town only confirmed it was a common rural Illinois tire of that era. The absence of high-quality cameras or a witness who saw the license plate turned vehicle tracing into chasing a fading shadow. Each Bronco owner on the Round 1 list was checked and rechecked, but although Hartman and the other 2 remained impossible to fully clear, police could not produce any direct evidence tying them to the disappearance. All 3 denied being in Minooka that day, and while inconsistencies in their statements kept them under scrutiny, investigators could not detain anyone solely for lack of an alibi. In the following weeks, search teams expanded from Minooka to Joliet, Morris, and towns along the interstate. They looked in abandoned industrial sites, remote bridges, empty warehouses, and rarely traveled riverbanks, anywhere a trace might surface. Yet after surveying dozens of locations, nothing indicated Harper had ever been there. Public tips saw a girl who looked like Harper, a suspicious green vehicle in the next town over. All turned out to be false alarms or unverifiable. The team chased every lead, from lost children in Joliet to a girl seen with a man at an Indiana rest stop, but each spark of hope died the moment the details didn't match. None of them was Harper. Detective Keller pinned a larger map on the briefing room wall, marking every suspicious point, possible travel direction, and area already searched. After 2 months the map was covered in red, green, and yellow pins, yet the critical blank spaces places Harper or the suspect might still surface grew smaller. Routes out of Illinois into Indiana, Wisconsin, or Iowa had all been coordinated and checked, but no checkpoint logged anything useful. Harper seemed to have been swept off the map in one April afternoon, without a trace. The investigation began hitting manpower limit. Will County Police still had other cases, and after an intense 3+ month search with no progress, keeping dozens of officers assigned full-time became impossible. Internal meetings gradually shifted focus from find new leads to reassess resources. Though the fear for Harper never lessened, especially for Keller and his team, the reality was that the case had reached a heavy stalemate, with no visible way forward. By the end of the 3rd month, Harper Adams's missing person file was officially transferred to the Illinois State Police Cold Case Unit, not an abandonment, but recognition that the case now required a unit built for long-term, patient, differently angled pursuit. The decision came in a heavy atmosphere. Ellen Adams sat silent when told the original team would scale back manpower and could no longer conduct wide-area searches. She kept putting up posters, going to every market and store asking if anyone had seen a little girl forced into a vehicle too fast to scream. Neither the Adams family nor the Minooka community was ready to accept that 3 months of searching had produced no answer. But on paper, in internal meetings, and in every report, Harper Adams's disappearance officially entered the phase every investigator dreads writing: no new lead. Transferring the file to cold case did not close the door on hope, but it drew a clear line that the easiest steps were over, and whatever lay ahead would no longer depend on traces or witnesses, but on persistence and whatever time might eventually reveal. 3 months after Harper vanished from Manuka, the case file sat in limbo, while in reality, the little girl's life had been ripped from everything familiar within the first hours. Harper had no idea where she was when the Bronco left Illinois. All she saw were slivers of sunlight through the windows, the loud engine vibration, and the lurching every time the abductor accelerated. The period that followed felt to her like scrambled fragments of memory, long highways, strange motels, old sinks, all mixed with a fear she couldn't name. In the early years of captivity, Harper was constantly moved from place to place, never staying anywhere long enough for a clear memory to form. Sometimes she was in a cramped room behind an old warehouse, other times in a mobile home parked on empty land on the outskirts of Kansas. Each move happened fast, usually at dawn or late evening when it was still dim and the abductor wanted no eyes on them. Every time they arrived somewhere new, Harper watched him cover the license plates, draw the curtains, and check that no one was following. From those actions she understood clearly that she was not allowed to be seen by anyone. Harper's identity was completely controlled. The abductor never used her real name. He forced her to answer to Emily, a name that felt utterly foreign. He took away everything tied to who she really was from the very first days: her backpack, crayon box, drawing notebook, even the red hair tie she loved. Those items never reappeared, and Harper never knew where they were thrown away. He didn't talk much, but whenever she asked about her family, he answered curtly that everything's fine, or they don't want to find you. Words that sank her deeper into confusion. Being forced to accept a new name left Harper floating in a void with nothing to hold on to. The abductor allowed her no contact with anyone but him. In the rundown motels, Harper was told not to look out the window if she heard a car or voice. When he had to go out, she had to sit still in the room, make no sound, and if she cried, he immediately covered her mouth, or yelled until she shook with fear. That isolation lasted long enough that she stopped knowing what day of the week it was or which state she was in. Harper was not allowed to go to school for the first several years. The only reading material she ever saw were old newspapers or repair manuals the abductor brought in. No homework, no friends, no playground, no classroom, nothing that resembled the life she had known. The only thing she could do was stare at the floor, play with a few small objects she managed to hide in her pocket, or listen for his footsteps when he came back. Every day was so identical that Harper gradually lost all sense of time passing. Harper was completely cut off from information. No radio played in the room, no TV, no newspapers, nothing that would let her know the outside world was still turning. When the abductor turned on the car radio, he flipped channels instantly. When he bought papers or magazines at rest stops, he left them in the vehicle and never let Harper read. That meant she had no idea what was happening in Manuka, whether her family was looking for her, or what the people who loved her were going through. In the beginning, the abductor changed hiding places so often that Harper felt she was always living in limbo. One week she was in a room with a window facing a field, the next in the basement of a strange house, then in a small cabin in sparse woods. Long nighttime drives became part of life, so she rarely knew where she would wake up the next morning. He acted as if someone might be chasing them, as if any outside noise could make him pack up in minutes and disappear. The constant moving not only erased her sense of place, but also made her unable to tell what was home and what was just temporary. Everything was just another set of unfamiliar walls. The endless relocations, combined with total information blackout and being forced to live under a false identity, caused Harper to gradually lose all concept of time and geography. She no longer knew which state or town she was in, or even what season it was, because most of the time she was kept indoors. Years later, Harper described this period as one long blacked-out void, where each day was erased before it could be remembered. During those years, Manuka still had posters looking for an 8-year-old girl, while Harper at 8 years old was existing in a completely different world, where every trace of her old life had been severed from the very first hours. The early years of captivity passed in absolute isolation, gradually making Harper accustomed to having no one but her abductor and makeshift rooms. But when she entered her teenage years, her life began to change in a new way that Harper initially couldn't explain. The abductor started taking Harper with him when he moved to a quiet suburban neighborhood in Oklahoma, where he could create a more stable cover to avoid drawing attention. This was also when he forced Harper to attend school under a completely false identity, a name she had heard for years but never thought would become her legal identity, Emily Lane. On her first day of school, Harper couldn't believe she was actually stepping into a classroom after all those years. But the excitement quickly gave way to tension as the abductor constantly drilled into her what she had to say. A different age, a different hometown, different parents' names, a different past. She knew full well that one wrong detail would make him furious, or worse, he would disappear with her again. School gave Harper a chance to see the outside world she thought she had lost forever. But it also made her aware of the contradictions in the life story the abductor had built for Emily Lane. When teachers asked students to talk about where they used to live, Harper stumbled because she couldn't remember all of his instructions. Whenever anyone asked deeper questions about her family, she had to answer quickly and change the subject to hide the fact that she had no memories matching the fabricated story. Harper wrote the wrong home address 3 times in 1 month, simply because every time they moved, he made her memorize a different previous address in case someone asked. Those mismatched pieces made Harper start to realize that the life she was forced to play wasn't just fake in the details, it was fake in its entire structure. From then on, she started paying attention to the documents the abductor used: health insurance cards with forged signatures, late submitted school registration forms filled out by hand, the address book he always kept hidden and never let Harper touch. Whenever he told a story about your real mother or our old hometown, his words were never consistent. Sometimes they lived in Missouri, sometimes Arkansas. One day her mother was dead, the next she was alive somewhere else and didn't want to see her daughter. Harper recorded those contradictions in silence, but inside she became increasingly certain that what she was being told was not the truth. Living a double life, Harper gradually developed a habit of observing everything. She began noticing the abductor's moving patterns, the times he packed more belongings when leaving the house, the evenings he was especially on high alert, the way he erased traces every time they crossed state lines. Harper noticed anomalies in their living environment: windows always closed or locked, the mailbox only checked at set times, neighbors rarely seeing them because he always avoided contact. Those small details made Harper realize that this stable environment was just another layer of disguise, and he never actually stopped running. The older she got, the more Harper felt something inside pushing her to ask more questions, not just about where she was living, but about her real past. In the quiet hours before sleep, Harper tried to recall the gate of her old elementary school, the house in Manuka, the woods near the walk to school, her mother's face, her father's voice, the familiar smell of breakfast. The memories were faint, but they hadn't disappeared. Harper kept those images hidden in her heart as the only proof that she had existed before becoming Emily Lane. Her teenage years became the time Harper clearly realized that her life had been stolen, and her true identity was being buried under layers of lies built by her abductor. And it was from the growing contradictions in the life she was forced to live that Harper began to nurture the desire to reclaim her real past, even though she didn't yet know where to start, or whether it would lead to freedom or to even greater danger. The ever-increasing contradictions in the story, forced on her by the abductor, made it impossible for Harper to stay still any longer, and the urge to reclaim her past gradually turned into a desire to escape the fake life she was being forced to live. Harper first started thinking about running away after an afternoon at school when the teacher asked students to write about their real hometown. She sat staring at the blank page, trying to imagine what a normal kid would write, but only scattered memories of Manuka came to mind. For the first time in years, Harper felt an intense longing to find her way back there, even though she had no idea which direction it was on a map. By that time the abductor had grown complacent, believing Harper had settled into her new identity. He didn't realize that sending her to school had opened a door. The maps hanging in the classroom, geography lessons, stories classmates told about nearby towns, all of it helped Harper understand the world beyond 4 walls. Harper spent weeks quietly studying the streets around the house they were living in. She discovered a bus route that went toward Wichita, which she figured was crowded enough to disappear into. Harper didn't know the way to Illinois, but she knew Wichita was the largest city nearby and might give her a chance to reach police or at least find someone to beg for help. Harper's first escape plan started with tiny steps, memorizing bus times, counting the distance from the house to the stop, noticing which neighbors left their front doors open in the morning. She knew she only had a few minutes each day when the abductor went out for groceries. That was her only window. Harper was careful not to show any sign that might make him suspicious. Then one morning, when he left to pick up groceries, Harper bolted out the door and ran with every ounce of strength she had. The rising sun made everything brighter than usual, and her heart pounded so hard she thought she might collapse at any moment. Harper ran across an empty lot, climbed a wooden fence, and reached the road leading to the bus stop. When she saw the bus stopped at the intersection, Harper felt as though she had touched freedom. But every step made her realize the surroundings were far more unfamiliar than expected. The landmarks she had tried to memorize from the classroom window didn't match reality. Harper got lost within minutes. As she tried to reorient herself, a pickup truck appeared behind her. Harper heard the long screech of brakes, then saw him get out, panicked and furious. He grabbed her arm as if he would never let go again. No one on that empty road witnessed Harper being dragged back, and she couldn't scream for help because they were in a wide-open, sparsely populated area. After the failed escape, the abductor completely lost the sense of security he had spent years building. He immediately moved them out of the Oklahoma neighborhood. Harper was no longer allowed to go to school. The windows in the new house were nailed shut, and anything that could help her navigate was removed. Every day he controlled where Harper went, what she did, even where she stood in the room. He told her that if she tried to run again, everything would end. A vague threat clear enough to make Harper understand she had to be more cautious than ever. Harper realized that escaping by physical strength alone was impossible. A child could not outrun someone who had been planning escapes for nearly a decade. She had to change strategy. Instead of running, Harper focused on observing, memorizing and collecting the smallest pieces of information related to her true identity. While rummaging for something to pass the time, Harper found an old envelope postmarked from Illinois. She didn't know who it was addressed to, but seeing the state name felt like waking up. Harper started keeping every suspicious detail: scraps of paper with unknown phone numbers, flyers with Illinois addresses, a torn map piece the abductor hid in the truck. She carefully hid them where he would never look: inside cabinet cracks, under wooden boxes, inside the lining of her sleeping bag. Harper knew she wasn't strong enough to run yet, but she could be patient enough to wait for the right moment. And most importantly, she knew that to reclaim her real past, she had to hold on to everything that proved she had once been Harper Adams before being forced to become Emily Lane, once again nurturing a fragile but stubborn hope. Ever since Harper began secretly hiding scraps of paper, torn addresses, old envelopes, and any Illinois-related details she suspected were tied to her true identity, the idea of finding scientific proof became crystal clear in her mind. The failed escape and tighter control didn't make Harper give up. They forced her to choose a safer path, finding evidence the abductor could not erase, something that rose above all of his lies. When she saw a genealogy DNA test kit for sale at the supermarket, Harper instantly knew it could be the only key. She had read a little about genetics in the few remaining books on the shelf, and even a simple diagram was enough to show her that DNA cannot be faked with words. From that moment, her long simmering doubt turned into a concrete plan. Harper watched him every day, memorizing his routine to find a safe window of time. In her coat pocket she kept the DNA kit she had managed to steal while he was arguing with a store employee. She waited for the moment he let his guard down, usually after a few beers when he fell into a heavy sleep. Every night Harper pretended to read, hiding the fact that her eyes were fixed on the bathroom or bedroom door, confirming his breathing was steady and deep. When she was certain he wouldn't wake, Harper opened the vial exactly as the printed instructions showed, trying to keep her hands from shaking because she knew one mistake would ruin everything. After collecting the sample and sealing the kit, Harper hid it inside the lining of her sleeping bag, waiting for a chance to mail it. Whenever she was sent to take out the trash to the community bins, she slowed her pace near the public mailboxes, an area he usually ignored. Harper walked casually, slipped the envelope into the slot, then turned away as if nothing had happened. The moment the envelope dropped to the bottom of the metal box, forced Harper to take a deep breath to suppress the feeling that she had just freed a part of her life. From that day on, Harper lived in limbo. She didn't know how fast or slow the company would process the sample, what form the results would arrive in, and most crucially, whether he would notice the strange envelope. When a batch of mail arrived, Harper was so tense that even seeing a plain white envelope made her breathing tighten. He tossed the stack on the table and went to shower, those few minutes became a precious opportunity Harper refused to miss. She carefully peeled the edge of the envelope, opened it just enough to read the content, her eyes racing over the lines until her heart nearly stopped at the two most critical pieces of information. There was zero genetic relationship whatsoever with the man who had kept her for years. Harper's data matched a cluster of people living in Illinois. She didn't need to understand the technical terms to grasp what it meant. She was not only unrelated to him by identity, but she had real blood relatives in that direction. The next section of the report showed two high-confidence matches, labeled likely immediate family. The testing company automatically shared data with law enforcement genealogical databases in potential child abduction cases. Harper's results triggered an immediate alert. The report was synced to the system, flagged as potential abduction victim. And the notification went straight to the Illinois State Police and the cold case unit handling missing children from the... In Illinois, the file on Harper Adams, long gathering dust, was reopened in seconds when the system linked Harper's DNA to the reference sample her father had submitted years earlier. Searching for his missing daughter, Harper had no idea what was happening on the other side of the country, but in that moment, as she stood in the cramped house with the carefully resealed envelope, everything had already slipped beyond the abductor's control. The path back to her real life had been activated, not by luck, but by the quietest and bravest decision she had ever made. The DNA match with the Adams family was relayed to the Illinois State Police in mere seconds, and the report went straight to Detective Keller's desk, the man in charge of dozens of missing child cold cases from the... Keller had worked countless cold cases in his career, but when the name Harper Adams flashed on the alert list, he stopped cold. This file had haunted the entire unit because the disappearance was so fast, so clean, and remained unexplained for nearly 2 decades. Keller pulled the dust-covered file, almost 3 inches thick, and cross-checked every old detail against the new DNA report. The fresh data was unmistakable. A female, approximately 27 years old, carrying an unidentified individual whose identifier did not match the recorded guardian, showed a strong blood relationship to the Adams family. That single detail alone told Keller the case had to be reopened immediately. He began by reviewing every entry from 1985, especially the moment Harper vanished, possible directions of travel, lists of suspicious vehicles, and all initial suspects. But the most critical step was image comparison. Keller ordered the tech unit to run an anthropometric model matching Harper's age 8 photo against the woman in the DNA database. Technology in 2004 was vastly improved from the 1980s, and by simulating adult bone structure, facial ratios, and soft tissue markers, the system returned a near 90% match, strong enough for Keller to treat it as conclusive. From there, Keller revisited the entire night. Dozens of names appeared in the original investigation, but only 3 had been flagged high probability. 2 were long since cleared by solid alibis. That left 1 name never fully confirmed, yet never fully ruled out: Raymond Hartman. Hartman had lived near Manuka at the time of the abduction. He owned an older green Bronco seen multiple times near the school. He'd been mentioned in a parent's statement, but no witness in 1985 could tie him to... Most telling, Hartman vanished from the area just weeks after Harper disappeared, a lead that lacked enough evidence then to pursue. Keller reread every old note on Hartman: erratic behavior, frequent job changes, travel history with years-long unexplained gap. When matched against the new DNA results and the timeline of Harper's removal from Illinois, Hartman stood out far above any other suspect. His behavioral profile fit a perpetrator with the means, opportunity, and controlling tendencies to carry out a long-term abduction. Keller contacted the data analysis unit to reconstruct Hartman's posts. Administrative records, rental history, and DMV data showed sporadic appearances in Missouri, Kansas, and Oklahoma, 3 states that perfectly aligned with the periods Harper had been moved according to the DNA report summary. The more pieces Keller connected, the clearer the case structure became. His immediate reaction upon seeing the DNA and travel route connections was to notify his superiors and request formal request to reopen the investigation. Keller drafted a summary report detailing why the case demanded reinvestigation: direct line DNA match, anthropometric confirmation, The unusual alignment between Harper's journey and Hartman's travel pattern, and the fact that the identity Emily Lane did not exist in any legitimate database before night, everything pointed to one conclusion: Harper Adams was living under a false identity and very likely still under Hartman's control. With evidence that strong, the case was officially reopened after nearly 20 years on ice. A new task force was formed with Keller as lead investigator. From that moment, the Harper Adams case was no longer just a small-town sad memory from 1985. It became an active operation to uncover the truth, locate the victim, and set the stage for the next step. No one could have predicted. Keller treated the case reopening as the signal to shift from file review to field action, and the team's first step was to locate where Hartman was living after nearly 20 years of leaving almost no clear trail. Using scattered administrative fragments, last driver's license renewal, old rental addresses, registration for an older pickup, the team pieced together Hartman's movements and narrowed the search to a northern suburb of Tulsa, where a middle-aged man matching his description lived quietly, under a new name, but with the exact same date of birth. Keller ordered cross-checks of tax records, landlord information, and local medical facility data. Everything matched the behavioral notes from 1985, lived quietly, minimal social contact, frequent job changes, and a habit of traveling at night. The team quickly agreed this was almost certainly Hartman, because he had crossed multiple states and tended to react strongly to any perceived threat. Direct approach was ruled out. Keller proposed a multi-state covert surveillance operation, coordinated among Illinois State Police, Oklahoma Highway Patrol, and the FBI Midwest Field Office. Units split remote monitoring duties, using fixed traffic cameras to log Hartman's routines, while avoiding any contact that might alert him. In the early days of surveillance, Hartman behaved exactly like someone used to living in the shadows, left the house at odd hours, stopped at gas pumps, but never entered the store, paid cash for everything, and drove unnecessary loops to detect tails. That very paranoia convinced Keller they had the right man. Days of surveillance yielded no direct information about Harper, but provided enough behavioral data to move to the next phase. Trash pull for DNA. Local law allowed collection of discarded items placed at the curb, so the team waited for the evening Hartman took out the garbage. The moment he turned back inside, an FBI agent retrieved the bags and rushed them via secure priority transport to the Illinois State Police lab. Inside were mostly beer cans, food wrappers, tissues, and empty packaging, but the lab recovered two key items: a toothbrush and a partially used roll of duct tape with faint fingerprint. DNA was extracted that same night, and Keller waited anxiously while technicians compared it to old. The result came back in one sentence, powerful enough to transform the entire investigation. The sample matched DNA from a handkerchief recovered near Harper's last known location, and that moment confirmed every theory Keller had built. Hartman wasn't just the strongest suspect, he was the man who took Harper from Manuka almost 20 years earlier. Having matching DNA opened the door to the next step, preparing an arrest warrant. Keller compiled a comprehensive report including current DNA, 1985 evidence DNA, interstate travel proof, and behavioral analysis, consistent with a long-term abductor who maintains control over the victim. The report went to legal for a federal arrest warrant, on charges of interstate kidnapping of a minor and prolonged unlawful imprisonment. Simultaneously, the team planned the intervention to ensure Harper, if still with Hartman, was not in danger. With every piece now locked into a clear conclusion, Keller knew confrontation with Hartman was imminent, and every subsequent move had to be flawless. One small mistake, and the man who had held Harper for nearly 2 decades could vanish again. With legal paperwork complete and the federal arrest warrant approved, Keller shifted full focus to the intervention plan, where the top priority was not Hartman but Harper, who might be living inside the very house the team had watched for weeks. Any mistake could endanger Harper or allow Hartman to flee, so the operation was designed with maximum safety protocols. Keller met with FBI, local SWAT, and Tulsa police to finalize approach tactics. The house sat on the edge of a residential area, with one main entrance and a back door opening onto vacant land. The team chose a double pincer tactic. One unit would approach the front door with a warrant, while a second unit silently sealed all rear exits. Every member was reminded, Harper had been held nearly 20 years. she was highly likely to be terrified, overreactive, or unable to comprehend what was happening. Rescue personnel were therefore ordered to remain calm, gentle, and absolutely non-threatening. Execution time was set for morning, when Hartman's routine kept him home alone and less vigilant. When the go order was given, Team 1 moved to the front door, Team 2 split into 3 small groups to cover the rear, and a backup unit waited down the street in case Hartman tried to flee by vehicle. Everyone stayed silent, communicating only by hand signals. Keller did not carry a shield or weapon. He stayed back as coordinator, eyes fixed on the second-floor windows where he hoped Harper was inside. At the predetermined moment, the SWAT commander knocked hard and announced clearly, "Federal Police, open the door." Seconds later, loud noise erupted inside. Hartman bolted out the back, but he only made it a few steps before Team 2 took him down. Keller immediately signaled Team 1 to enter and locate Harper. The greatest risk now was not Hartman, but Harper panicking or hiding in extreme distress. Inside, the house was dim, many items locked, curtains drawn, rooms small and dark with almost no signs of normal life. When the team reached the room at the end of the hall, they found Harper sitting in the corner, arms wrapped around her knees, unresponsive to calls. Approach was extremely slow. A female agent gently knelt several feet away, introduced herself, and repeated that Harper was not under arrest, that she was safe, and that they were there to get her out. Harper did not reply, only stared with eyes both wary and vacant. Her lack of reaction did not surprise Keller. He knew a victim controlled that long often cannot trust anyone instantly. To ensure she was not injured or threatened, medical personnel were brought in. They spoke softly, moved slowly, and explained every action before touching her. Once she was calm enough to be moved outside, Keller ordered immediate on-site identity verification, an essential step to prevent future legal challenges or misidentification claims. In the ambulance, a technician took a buccal swab from Harper. The sample was sealed and rushed to a mobile lab set up at Tulsa PD for fastest possible comparison. While waiting, Keller brought out one of the most important pieces of 1985 evidence, an enlarged, plastic-protected copy of Harper's age. When he held it in front of her, she stared for a long time without visible reaction. Keller understood the delay was not failure to recognize, it was her mind struggling to process memories suppressed for decades. When the lab signaled completion, everyone present fell silent. The printed report contained one short but definitive line, direct line DNA match. Harper Adams. Every effort across nearly 20 years, from the night the little girl vanished on a quiet Manuka road, through the posters plastered around town, to the secret submission of her DNA converged in that single moment. Keller stepped out of the ambulance, stood beside Harper and said softly, just loud enough for her to hear, "We've confirmed it. You are Harper Adams. We're taking you home." The words did not produce a dramatic outburst, but Harper's shoulders trembled slightly, as though the truth had finally reached a part of her memory she thought was buried forever. After 19 years separated from her family, Harper was called by her real name for the first time since the day she disappeared. The on-scene DNA confirmation delivered the answer investigators had waited decades for. But for Harper, what mattered most right then was basic safety and stability after her release from years of captivity. Immediately after Hartman was taken into custody, the medical team transported Harper to an emergency care facility run jointly by the FBI and Oklahoma Victim Assistance. There, she underwent a full physical evaluation to assess her condition after prolonged isolation, mild malnutrition, chronic vitamin deficiencies, several old healed injuries that had left her posture uneven, and strong stress reflexes whenever anyone approached. A team of psychologists evaluated Harper for hours, using protocols designed specifically for long-term coercive control victims. They noted defensive reactions, extreme wariness about questions regarding identity, and especially the habit of scanning the room for exits every time someone entered. All of it reflected prolonged captivity, yet also showed she retained enough awareness to understand she was now in a safe place. While the medical assessment continued, Keller and the investigative team kept building the non-DNA identification of Harper. They pulled every medical record the Adams family had provided in 1985. A small scar from a bicycle fall, mild pollen allergy, an indentation on the left wrist bone from a dislocation at age 4. When the doctor examined her, all 3 markers matched perfectly. Another key indicator sealed it: Harper was left-handed, and had the nervous habit of rotating her thumb when stressed, the exact behavior her mother had described in a statement 19 years earlier. With every medical marker and personal trait lining up with the DNA, Keller knew it was time to notify the Adams family. He contacted the Illinois State Police directly and requested a dedicated, secure channel so the news could be delivered with care. This could not be a quick phone call. The family had lived through nearly 2 decades of disappointment, hope, and renewed disappointment. One small misstep could cause severe psychological harm. Harper's mother was contacted first. When Keller told her they had found a woman whose DNA matched, she stood silent for almost a minute, unable to speak. He had to repeat twice that the results had been confirmed by multiple methods before she broke down sobbing and asked only one thing, over and over. Is she sick? Afterward, the Illinois State Police arranged an in-person meeting so the family could be formally notified and shown the full DNA evidence and authentication file before any reunion took place. They were walked through the controlled reunion protocol mandatory for long-term captivity victims. An immediate meeting with loved ones could overwhelm Harper, so psychologists and investigators would mediate the initial contact. The Adams family was asked to bring childhood photos of Harper, a few old belongings, and above all to remain calm, avoid rapid-fire questions, and not hug her too soon if she wasn't ready. When everything was prepared, Harper was brought to the reunion room at the Victim Support Center, a space with two-way glass for her protection. She entered cautiously, eyes constantly scanning. She had no idea who would appear or what to expect. The opposite door opened, and her mother stepped in. Much older than the last memory Harper carried, yet the eyes, the hair color, and the way she placed her hand on her chest when emotional were exactly the same as when Harper was small. Harper froze, as if time had stopped. Her mother took one careful step forward, not touching her, and said softly, "Mom's here, Harper." That moment silenced every agent and investigator who had worked the case. Harper stared for a long time, matching the face in front of her against the faded images she had guarded for years. Then she took one small step toward her mother. When their eyes truly met, something unlocked inside Harper: recognition, trust, and memories she thought were gone forever. Her mother extended a hand, still keeping distance, waiting for permission. Harper took another step, then reached out herself and hugged her mother. A hug that started stiff and slowly melted into choked sobs. After 19 years, the Adams family finally saw their daughter again, not the 8-year-old frozen in memory, but a grown woman carrying both wounds and strength no one could have imagined. And for the first time in nearly 2 decades, Harper heard her real name spoken by the person she thought she had lost forever. The reunion between Harper and her family was an irreplaceable milestone, but right after it, the truly difficult process began. Bringing Harper back to normal life after nearly 2 decades cut off from the world. Psychologists warned the family that the initial emotion was only the starting point. Recovery could take years, with periods when Harper would have to face pain, confusion, and repressed memories all at once. Harper entered an intensive trauma treatment program designed for long-term captivity survivors. In the first week she suffered constant nightmares, waking in the middle of the night, convinced she still heard Hartman's footsteps outside the door. Whenever someone entered a room without warning, her body instantly tensed as if ready to flee. The therapy team taught her basic emotional regulation techniques, rhythmic breathing, safe environment cues, and psychological anchors to use when panic hit. From those first highly stressed reactions, Harper gradually learned to slow her heartbeat, recognize when old memories were driving her behavior, and distinguish real danger from the habits of 19 years under control. Another crucial part of therapy was helping Harper relearn her own life, a paradox that is completely real for victims whose identities were erased for years. Specialists and family showed her photo albums, told her about people she used to know, places she had lived, and childhood habits she had unconsciously carried into adulthood. Some memories returned instantly: her cousin's laugh, the porch at Grandma's house, the sound of bicycle tires on the small hill leading to Maple Street. But other parts were completely blank, and Harper had to learn them from scratch, as if reading someone else's biography. She practiced writing her real name again, retraining a hand that had signed a false name for over a decade. Restoring identity happened legally as well as mentally. She had to re-establish every personal document, ID, passport, insurance, medical records, all under the name she had been stripped of at age 8. Lawyers helping Harper erased every remaining legal trace of Emily Lane, including school records, rental history, medical files, and anything generated by the life Hartman forced on her. Clearing those overlaps was both a challenge and an opportunity. Every deleted false record was one step closer to reclaiming her true life. Harper also had to get used to a new world, one she had never truly lived in. Technology, pace of life, culture, social norms. Even ordinary things everyone else takes for granted, like ordering food, grocery shopping, or using a bank card, were brand new experiences she had to learn from the beginning. The Adams family hired a social reintegration specialist to guide her step by step, walking safely in public, using a phone, scheduling doctor appointments, and the soft skills Hartman had never let her develop. Harper tried with determination, but there were plenty of breakdowns when she felt she didn't belong anywhere. The Adams family therefore had to adjust their entire rhythm to welcome Harper home. They were instructed not to ask too much about the past, not to change her routines too fast, and not to pressure her to be happy right away. Everyone in the house learned to communicate with Harper using the specialist's methods, slowly, clearly, always announcing approach, and always giving her the choice to join shared space or keep her privacy. Every family member had to accept that Harper could not and should not become the 8-year-old girl again. She had grown up in a distorted environment, carrying psychological scars that could not be erased overnight. The family's job was not to return her to the old version, but to help her build a new, safer, freer version connected to the real world. Along the way, Harper began to have her first moments of peace, waking up one morning without hearing threats, choosing her own clothes without asking permission, eating dinner with family, without scanning for every sound. Those small moments were not the end of the journey, but proof that Harper was slowly stepping out of the darkness of 19 stolen years, and gradually stepping into a life that truly belonged to her. While Harper's reintegration continued, the justice system moved into its decisive phase, the trial of Raymond Hartman. The formal charges rested on the strongest evidence the case had ever had: DNA, travel timeline, 1985 physical evidence, and nearly 2 decades of unlawful captivity. As soon as the file reached the federal prosecutor's office, Hartman was indicted on multiple counts: interstate kidnapping of a minor, false imprisonment, identity fraud, unlawful custody, and obstruction of justice. Each charge carried heavy penalties, but combined they could keep Hartman in prison for the rest of his life. At the initial trial, prosecutors presented the case chronologically to highlight the deliberate and persistent nature of Hartman's crimes. A handkerchief recovered from the Manuka Dirt Road in 1985, once considered low-value evidence, was displayed under courtroom lights and directly linked to Hartman's DNA. Next came maps of the route he used to take Harper out of Illinois, sightings of the green Bronco, gas station surveillance images, and 1985 witness statements describing a man watching children near the school. Prosecutors detailed the long-term captivity model, constant moves, fabricated identity for Harper, forced isolation from society, and control maintained through threats. Behavioral analyses from criminal psychologists were introduced as supporting evidence, showing Hartman planned and prepared many steps before the abduction. The defense tried to argue that parts of the timeline were not absolutely precise, or raised questions about the chain of custody of 1985 evidence. Every argument was weak and unsupported, because most evidence had been confirmed by DNA, an incontestable fact. Even when they attempted to question Harper's mental stability, the judge quickly shut it down. Psychiatric evaluations showed her statements fully matched objective facts. When the witness phase began, the investigator's testimony carried special weight. Keller described the entire breakthrough, from the DNA alert, to surveilling Hartman, and collecting the trash pull sample. He explained Hartman's extreme vigilance during surveillance. As indirect proof, the man knew exactly what he was hiding. Next, the DNA expert explained the matching methodology, proving near absolute certainty, linking Harper to the Adams family, and the 1985 evidence to Hartman. Finally, Harper entered the courtroom as a witness, not to recount every year of captivity, but simply to confirm one fact. The man at the defense table was the person who forced her to live under a false identity for nearly 20 years. Harper spoke little, but every word was sharp and steady, unshaken. The way she looked at Hartman, no longer afraid, only certain, silenced the entire room. That composure, combined with the mountain of evidence, meant the jury did not deliberate long. When the judge read the verdict, every eye turned to Hartman, guilty on all counts. The final sentence was life imprisonment without parole, the punishment for a calculated, prolonged kidnapping that inflicted severe trauma and stole more than half a child's life. For the Adams family and the investigative team, the sentence could not erase the years Harper was held, but it ended the existence of the man who caused it all. And for Harper, it was the first time in her adult life that she saw justice stand on her side. Hartman's sentencing closed the most important chapter of the case, but for the investigators and the Adams family, gaps remained, lonely puzzle pieces that even after the overall picture had been assembled, no one knew exactly where they fit. The first question revolved around the green Bronco, the symbol of the entire abduction. Although Hartman had sold the vehicle in the early 1990s and its trail had gone cold, experts still could not determine whether he picked it randomly or with intent from the very beginning. DMV records showed no ownership by Hartman before 1984, yet they could not confirm from whom he bought it or why it was seen multiple times near the school in the weeks before Harper vanished. The Bronco became a crucial marker that was never located for further analysis of stains, fibers, or possible remaining DNA. The second gap lay in Harper's own memory. She remembered certain details vividly: the reflection of light on the car window, the smell of cigarette smoke on Hartman's jacket, the metallic clinking when he locked the doors. But she could not recall the exact first stretch of road, the first house, or the moment she was forced to change her name. Many experts noted that a child's brain tends to lock away the most intense traumatic memories, especially from the initial period of captivity. Other memories had become distorted over time due to prolonged isolation. Harper tried to piece those fragments together in therapy sessions, but large blank spaces remained that even she wasn't sure she wanted to open. The third gap concerned the years Hartman moved constantly across state. Administrative records only captured scattered addresses in Missouri, Kansas, and Oklahoma, with no trace of where he and Harper lived during the hundreds of days between moves. There were months-long periods that matched no rental records, utility bills, or vehicle registrations, leading investigators to believe Hartman lived in temporary shelters, mobile homes, or abandoned properties that left no official paper trail. Because Hartman refused to cooperate during questioning and left behind no journals or personal documents, most of that journey remains forever in darkness. Scattered witness reports over the years also could not be re-verified. Someone claimed to have seen a little girl resembling Harper at a Kansas rest stop in the late 1980s. Another remembered a middle-aged man with a young girl at a Missouri thrift store. There was even a 1993 report of a teenage girl asking for directions to Illinois, who immediately left when questioned further. None of these leads were strong enough to trace back to Hartman, and by the time the case was solved, those witnesses had either moved away or no longer remembered details clearly. Finally were the items Harper carried the day she disappeared: her hair tie, notebook, small yellow jacket. None were ever recovered, and no one knows where Hartman hid them. Some investigators believe they were discarded on the first day, others think they may lie somewhere hundreds of miles from Illinois at a long-forgotten stop. Those belongings probably would not have changed the outcome of the case, but for the Adams family they represent stolen pieces of memory they will never get back. When the case closed legally, these questions remained hanging in the air, no longer affecting the court's conclusion but serving as a continual reminder that not every truth can be filled in, even when justice has been served. The unanswered questions did not reduce the case's heat. On the contrary, once the trial ended and Harper's identity was officially revealed, national media immediately treated it as one of the longest yet still successful rescues in U.S. history. Major networks like CNN, ABC, and CBS covered the story with intense focus, not only because of the extraordinary length of time Harper was missing, but because of the DNA factor, the key that reopened what seemed a forgotten file. Many evening news programs called it the moment modern technology pulled a life back from the past. Harper became the centerpiece of analyses about the power of genetic genealogy testing, while Hartman was portrayed as the classic example of a criminal who hid in plain sight for decades. This intense attention quickly spread back to Minooka and Will County, where residents still remembered the day Harper disappeared as a community wound that had never fully healed. Harper's return brought enormous hope, but also reopened pain and memories of the hopeless search days of the elementary school she had attended. Held a private memorial ceremony and hung her old photo as a symbol of resilience and perseverance. Parents began demanding better security around schools. Community meetings about child safety drew far larger crowds than before. The case made the town understand that even the quietest places are not immune to abduction risks. On a national level, the Harper Adams case changed public perception about long-term missing children. Previously, when a child had been gone for many years, the public assumed survival chances were virtually zero. Harper's return after 19 years gave families of missing children renewed hope. Organizations like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children used the case as proof in campaigns urging DNA profile updates and encouraging parents to submit samples for long-term matching. Family DNA kit registrations surged in the weeks following the trial. The Adams family, though still healing, agreed to controlled media appearances to stress the importance of vigilance and preserving identification records. They did not share details of Harper's captivity to protect her recovery, but they spoke clearly about their own decades-long search, how they kept every photograph, every note, every hopeful phone call, even when all leads had gone cold. Their interviews delivered a powerful message: continuing the search, maintaining files, and submitting DNA is never pointless. Criminology experts also consider the Harper Adams file a classic case study in training. It became a lesson about the limitations of 1980s investigative techniques, the necessity of preserving even seemingly worthless evidence, and how new technologies can reopen cases thought permanently closed. Police academies, research institutes, and university criminology programs repeatedly cite the case to prove that persistence combined with science can reconnect broken investigative threads. Although Harper and her family chose a private life after their initial public period, her story continues to be retold each year in roundup articles about found missing children. The Harper Adams case grew beyond a single abduction. It became a symbol of resilience, forensic science progress, and the belief a community can maintain for nearly 2 decades, even when hope is at its thinnest. The influence of the Harper Adams case did not stop at media and community. It spread directly into law enforcement systems, forcing agencies across America to re-examine how missing child cases were handled. After reviewing the full 19-year file, the Illinois State Police and numerous federal units agreed that old investigative standards were no longer suitable for the modern era, especially in abductions with little physical evidence or perpetrators who crossed state lines. A new missing child protocol was introduced, emphasizing 3 core elements: collecting DNA within the first 24 hours, establishing immediate federal coordination instead of in stages, and mandatory long-term evidence retention regardless of apparent initial value. The Harper case showed that one tiny item, an old handkerchief thought worthless, could become the piece that reopened everything almost 2 decades later. As a result, DNA collection became mandatory for every cold case involving child victims. Many states created programs to collect precautionary family DNA samples for future matching and established standardized procedures to upload data into approved genealogical databases. This prevents files from being forgotten simply because technology did not exist at the time of initial investigation. Another major reform was strengthened federal-state connectivity. The Harper case demonstrated how a perpetrator constantly moving between states could fracture an investigation because each jurisdiction only saw a small segment of the journey. After the case, the FBI, U.S. Marshals Service, and NCMEC built new communication channels, ensuring instant data flows instantly regardless of individual state bureaucracy. When a missing child is suspected of being taken across state lines, information is now automatically shared with all relevant units, not just the originating location. NCMEC also upgraded its missing child alert system, especially its age progression image program. The Harper case proved long-term survival is possible, and keeping updated victim images can lead to recognition even when the victim is an adult. NCMEC improved its algorithms and expanded its forensic anthropology team to handle thousands more cases annually. Additionally, the Amber Alert program expanded its scope, shortened activation time, and added criteria for suspected targeted abduction cases where criminal signs are not immediately obvious. For younger investigators, The Harper case became a key lesson repeatedly taught at police academies. From never overlooking the smallest evidence, to understanding long-term offender behavior, to respecting the power of DNA and genealogy, the Harper Adams file became one of the most influential training documents. Many investigators have said the case made them rethink giving up on seemingly unsolvable files, because one new clue can change everything. Nationally, the Harper case helped drive a new generation of more flexible, science-based investigative procedures that never treat hope as expired, even after nearly 20 years. Just as the new child abduction investigative reforms were issued, the Harper Adams file was officially closed after almost 2 decades. This time not because of deadlock or lack of leads, but because the ultimate goal had been achieved. Harper regained her identity, the family regained their daughter, and justice was fully served. The name Harper Adams was restored on all legal documents, completely erasing the false name Hartman had forced upon her, and authorities changed the case status from missing child to recovered victim found alive, a designation rarely seen in NCMEC history. Still, healing for the Adams family could not be measured in weeks or months. The losses accumulated over 19 years could not vanish with one reunion or one verdict. The family had to learn to build a new relationship with Harper as an adult carrying layers of trauma. They rearranged the house to create safe spaces for her, learned her body language to avoid making her feel cornered, and patiently waited for her to open up on her own terms. Recovery was slow, but every small change, like Harper holding her mother's gaze a little longer, or signing her real name without hesitation, was a solid step forward the whole family cherished. For Harper herself, the journey to rediscover who she was only truly began after rescue. She had to plan a future from the starting line most people reach in their teens. What career, where to live, how to build an independent life. She started keeping a journal to gather memories, what she still remembered, what frightened her, and desires she had never dared voice during captivity. Therapists encouraged her to write everything down as a way to reclaim control of her own story so no one, not even Hartman, could dictate it anymore. As she stabilized, Harper expressed a wish to work with victim support programs or study psychology, something she described as the only way to turn 19 years of darkness into something meaningful for others. Within the investigative community, the Harper Adams case became a gold standard cold case training example, referenced at police academies, forensic conferences, and advanced training courses. It demonstrated the importance of long-term evidence preservation, the power of modern DNA technology, and the necessity of persistent follow-up on seemingly hopeless cases. The case's value lies not in sensationalism, but in the combination of professional skill, technology, and human endurance, 3 elements that lasted long enough to bring one victim home from the void of time. Looking back at the entire journey, the final message of the case is directed not only at investigators, but at the wider community, that even the tiniest hope is still worth guarding, that justice can arrive late, but when it does, it restores both truth and dignity to those who were robbed of them, and that a life stolen for almost 20 years can still be rebuilt from scratch when the victim is given agency and protection. The legacy of the Harper Adams case is not pain, but proof that family persistence, investigator dedication, and technological power can together achieve what once seemed impossible, returning a person to their own life. In today's United States, Harper Adams's story is not just a 19-year cold case solved. It is a very concrete reminder of how every family and community can actively protect itself. The fact that Harper secretly used a consumer DNA kit and mailed the sample showed that technology is no longer something distant in a lab. It sits on store shelves, and if used correctly, it can reconnect a missing person with family halfway across the country. This suggests to American families today: update your children's identification records, keep recent photos, understand the role of DNA, and know organizations like NCMEC don't rely solely on police. The detail of the green Broncos circling the school multiple times before Harper disappeared reminds us about everyday red flags: strange vehicles parked near schools for long periods, adults with no clear reason lingering around children, small changes in a child's route home. All deserve questions, not out of panic, but out of responsible vigilance. The Adams family's practice of keeping files, photos, and contact with police for nearly 2 decades, even after the case went cold, shows the power of persistence. The system can be overloaded, but proactive families who understand procedure, request file update, and submit DNA dramatically increase the chances their case will be noticed when new technology appears. Finally, the way Harper had to relearn her true identity, and treat her trauma reminds us that an American happy ending is not just a reunion on television. It requires the community to respect victims, avoid overexploitation, and support them long-term, from mental health services to education and job opportunities, so they can truly rebuild their lives. Thank you for joining us on Harper's powerful journey of resilience. If you found value in this story, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more cases brought to light through persistence and justice. See you in the next video, where we continue exploring true stories that change how we view safety and hope.